Today's video production was commissioned by AIA Kansas. The American Institute of Architects in Kansas is the state chapter of the American Institute of Architects. AIA Kansas provides services and programs to meet the needs and interests of Kansas architects and develop public awareness of the value of architects and architecture. Our 700 plus members are leaders in building healthy, sustainable communities that will serve our citizens into the future. Visit aiaks.org to learn more about membership benefits and our current advocacy efforts.
Welcome everybody, my name is Barry Schmidt with McCown Gordon Construction. Thanks for joining us today. I am a project manager for McCown Gordon Construction here in Manhattan, Kansas. We're currently at the Anthony Community Recreation Centers with the City of Manhattan. This is a project that has been a long time in the works, a culmination of a lot of different folks that have been gathering concepts and gathering public support and ultimately designing and building what you see here behind me today. This afternoon we're here at the Anthony Middle School and Recreation site. We're standing currently on the middle school football field. Directly behind me is the Anthony Recreation Center, the Community Rec Center for the City of Manhattan. And immediately adjacent to it to the north is the expansion of the Anthony Middle School site. I'm currently looking past the camera at some residential homes, lots of community areas and walking trails on both sides of this that make this really part of the central hub of this area of the community that relies heavily not only on school access, but access to parks and trails throughout the rest of the community. McCown Gordon is a general contractor, construction manager at risk firm that is headquartered out of the Kansas City, Missouri area. We currently have 3 offices, with Kansas City being the headquarters, Manhattan, Kansas, and Wichita. We were founded in 1999, and we currently serve all of Kansas and kind of the Midwest region. Our focuses are in the rural Kansas healthcare market, K-12, and city municipal work. McCown Gordon is what we would consider a mid-sized firm. We're a leader in the Kansas market for sure, and we typically see projects ranging from anywhere from a small renovation to large multi-year school bond projects that span many buildings and across many years of construction. The Anthony Recreation Center actually is combined with a larger rec project for the City of Manhattan. Specifically, our portion of the work is combined. It's the Eisenhower Recreation Center and the Anthony Recreation Center all under one umbrella. So two different sites, 2 buildings, and one design and one construction team. This particular project is a design-build project that was procured through a traditional alternative delivery method through the City of Manhattan with the 3-step process: RFQ, request for qualifications, RFP, request for proposal, and an interview process. This is actually a fairly lengthy process. It can span over the course of several weeks to a couple of months, depending on the process and the municipalities, but typically takes a few weeks to gather the RFQs, create a short list of sorts, and then go through an RFP or request for proposals where there's a price component, as well as an interview process that interviews multiple firms. On this particular project, and as is with most 3-step alternative delivery method projects, typically the alternative delivery method uses a 3-step process that includes a selection committee that gathers together all the information from the request for proposals, request for qualifications, and the interview process, and ranks those proposers into a grading metrics that ultimately results in one firm being selected or being the preferred contractor, and in this case a design-build team for selection. The idea of moving this project from a concept or from a RFP, RFQ stage into full construction, again, is a fairly lengthy process. In this particular one, the city had a very good public interest. The community was very involved in this process and ultimately was was desired to have a steering committee formed to create the programming aspects and what is it that the community really desires to have included in these projects. So this process on these two recreation centers took over a year, about 18 months to develop from the concept stage from when McCown-Gordon was selected until we actually had a guaranteed maximum price and we're well on our way into putting shovels into the ground to begin construction. We engaged with a 44-person steering committee at the city's request to gather the appropriate community support and community input so they could make sure that they captured all those wants and desires and the things that were really important to the community. Because this is a community facility, this is ultimately going to be used by the public and by the community of Manhattan. They wanted to make sure that it fit those desires that the community wanted. So this particular project and both Anthony and Eisenhower Middle School projects were combined with the Anthony and Eisenhower recreation facilities. These two projects aligned very well with the timing of them. So there was lots of considerations that needed to be taken to coordinate the efforts of site logistics, temporary construction, fencing, contractor access, egress, and access into and from the school district buildings. All had to be maintained 100% of the time for the projects, and this impacted both projects. These are active campuses that utilize all the facilities, football fields, tennis courts, the existing buildings, and all those efforts had to be coordinated into a really organized fashion to make sure that everyone was maintaining a safe egress into, easy access for school buses and parents, as well as allowing the community around the facilities to continue to enjoy the parks and the trails that are also running adjacent to the two facilities. These projects really have multiple components to consider when you're integrating the two facilities. There's the obvious, which is the aesthetic portion of it. You have two separate buildings that are owned by different entities, one by the school district, one by the city of Manhattan, that really need to complement each other. And that was of high importance to the community and the steering committee, was to make sure that they had two buildings that looked like they belonged together, yet still maintain their own separate identities. The other aspects include safety. The safety of the students that are maybe walking to and from school, that are getting dropped off by buses. How are they going to safely access their classrooms, walking to and from school, as well as walking, there's a walking trail to the south of the job site that the community uses regularly and acts as a connection between the residential neighborhoods and the rest of Manhattan or other parts of the community that had to be considered in a way that would make sure that maintain that connection to all of these new buildings, the school, the recreation center, the new school expansion, as well as the other community areas within the city. COVID-19 has impacted all of our lives in some fashion or another, whether it's masking, social distancing, or working from home, or just other impacts to our daily lives. Our construction industry really has been no different. It's also felt the impacts of COVID-19 and the pandemic, as well as the social distancing and masking requirements, as well as additional sanitation and sterilization procedures throughout our job sites. These impacts are also far-reaching into industries that we don't readily see on a daily basis. The different manufacturing facilities and components that all go into these facilities have all felt the impacts of COVID-19 and have ultimately caused some impact in one way or another, whether it be reduced staffing, social distancing guidelines. But at the end of the day, what this means is that there's been impacts to either procurement, as in how long does it take the material to get purchased and delivered to the job site, or just on how many people can be working in a certain area. These all have to be considered and taken into account for the delivery and the impacts of our construction projects. So we have two projects, Anthony and Eisenhower. They are identical buildings on different sites, both connected to the middle schools that they sit on the same, or they share the same site with. These projects are intentionally staggered in construction. So we have the Anthony site, which is a little bit ahead of the Eisenhower site. The skilled workers that it takes to install these facilities is in high demand. We staggered these two projects to allow for one contractor to install both facilities sequentially. So the Eisenhower site is a couple of months behind the Anthony site. The Eisenhower site currently just has slab on grade down, as well as the pre-engineered metal building has been delivered and is shortly coming up on steel erection once the roof panels and the wall panels are complete on the Anthony site. This project has the pre-engineered metal building that's currently the structure's been erected. We're going through the process of installing the roof panels and the metal siding panels. These are insulated metal panels that combine the skin, the weatherproof barrier, as well as the insulation value on the exterior of the project. The inside of the building, we're currently installing metal studs and all the mechanical, electrical, plumbing, fire sprinkler rough-ins in those areas that we're able to get started. Right now, I'd like to take a moment and introduce Tracy Anderson with Anderson Knight Architects. He'll be leading you through the process leading up to the construction and selection of the McCown-Gordon team on the middle school recreation centers.
All right, thank you, Barry. My name is Tracy Anderson with Anderson Knight Architects, and we're actually upstairs on the mezzanine level looking through the wall that will be the separating wall from the public side of the facility to the school side of the facility. And it looks like we've got some work going on with some electrical conduit being placed and some walls being framed up, and still trying to get some roofing and insulation in, but lots of activity today. And the space we are at right now is, I'm actually standing on a portion of the track. The space directly in front of me will be some restrooms and some open space for people to do stretching and talk to each other and things like that. We have a running track up here. We'll have two community spaces or meeting rooms that can be divided or opened up into one larger one. We have a warming kitchen that could be used in the future as a community kitchen for teaching and things like that. We have yoga areas. This process really started back in 2012, and here we are 8 years later, with a building that's partially done and another one just like it over at the other middle school. And the quality of life that's going to bring to our community is just so rewarding. We teamed up, Anderson Architects teamed up with RDG out of Des Moines to do what was called a strategic facility improvement plan. And that was really doing a needs assessment, a review and facility assessment of the existing parks and structures, and then a really large community engagement. The city voted the taxpayers voted on a quarter-cent sales tax for indoor rec and for some outdoor facility improvements, as well as trail gap improvements. And so I think that was in November of 2017 that they approved that. And so once that got approved, the city immediately released an RFQ for design build services for these two facilities and started doing work on improving the playability, the safety of other outdoor venues, and looking at where do we extend trails, where do we fill in gaps of missing trails. And so the money has gone to exactly what the voters were requesting. So when we were awarded the project, we knew that we'd be working with a steering committee on it. However, we didn't realize we'd be working with a 44-person steering committee. And so, our team took that in stride, and we worked with that committee from day one. A lot of those steering committee meetings happened either at the headquarters fire station or at the Foundations building in their large meeting room. We were actually asked to sort of slow down that front-end process of schematic design over multiple months so that we could have opportunities to engage that steering committee, come back, assess that engagement information, and then be able to develop opportunities and options to present to them going back but also in that time frame to be able to go to, say, the Parks and Rec Advisory Board, or in front of the commission, or in front of a group of other stakeholders, and say, this is the direction things are being requested to go, and just get approval through all those groups and then keep moving forward. And so that schematic design process, if I remember right, stretched out almost to 8 or 9 months. Obviously everybody wanted everything, and so trying to work as many amenities into the project as we could was really our top desire. How do we keep costs down in other places so that we can bring as many amenities into the facility as possible? And I'll say one of the top ones was turf. Being able to turf a portion of the gym so that indoor soccer and other things like that could be done throughout the year. From the very beginning, the school district was involved, because the school district and our city Parks and Rec department have had relationships in the past on several facilities and agreed use arrangements. So it was an easy one to navigate. It was, during the early stages of the design process, the schematic stages, the school district was involved. They had a say at what was going on, and partly because we knew they were going to be joined to the middle schools, and we had to figure out that safety of separation during the school day when the school might be using some of the gym and when the public might be using some of the gym. And that was really one of the main design elements that our team came up with to help provide that separation and safety. This wall right here that's behind me is a separation, a physical barrier from the public side to the school side. Now down on the lower level, there's obviously doors that access that school side, but they'll be on a system that only allows those doors to be used in an emergency egress situation during the day, when the public has access to this and the school might be using that. Otherwise, the public won't have any access to that side of the structure. Well, it's being managed through a couple of different methods. I mean, one is the hardware that's physically on the doors, and then the electronics that are engaged into that, and the staff that will be housed here will be partly monitoring that during the school year. But those same systems are tied into the school's systems as well, and so there's an interconnectedness there. So that did incorporate a relationship of working with not only the Parks and Rec's IT folks, but the school's IT folks to get all that sorted out and make sure those systems were talking to each other and that those doors would act appropriately. Probably one of the primary considerations from a design standpoint was, how do we tie these facilities into the existing schools, but not into the shell of what is the existing school at the day we were designing, but what the shell of the additions to the existing school was going to be. And we didn't know exactly what that was going to look like when we were in to the design process. And so there were times where we thought a certain shape might happen, and we just knew we needed to keep these buildings flexible enough and sited appropriately that we could shift them as needed to tie into whatever the shape was of what was getting built onto as the additions of the middle school. So as a longtime Manhattan resident, 30 plus years now, facilities like this that really add to the quality of life of a community are really important to me, and it's one of the small things that we need to be doing as communities to attract and retain talent to our communities. It's getting harder and harder to find people to move to your community, and doing projects like this that really provide that great quality of life, exterior, interior, and trails, all those things have meaning, and that's how we make our communities vibrant and prosperous.
The steering committees that were established for these two projects were really a volunteer basis that ultimately was appointed by the City Commission to gather the the pulse of the community. What are those amenities and programs that were important to the community? We got a lot of different opinions as well as some very good insights to what are those things that are important to the community. And what we found out through the process of surveying this team, this steering committee, as well as presenting different concepts and options for them was they had some very strong opinions about the various components. And some of those, to name a few, are multiple courts. These courts are varying in size as well as varying in the programming or the sport that can be played on them. Running tracks, an elevated running track was very important and is one of the key features of this facility. It currently spans 1/2 to about 2/3 of the facility. That's an elevated track that runs around the larger portion of the facility. There are four full-size basketball courts on this that can be converted to include volleyball, basketball, pickleball, as well as some various other sports. They're very adaptable sporting courts. The core of the building is really comprised of various office spaces, restrooms, locker rooms, and changing facilities. And on the second floor, the mezzanine of this building includes community centers, as well as just circulation and lounging areas to allow spectators to view those courts and the different sports that are being played on the courts. We officially broke ground on the Anthony Recreation site in March of 2020. We're currently expecting this to be a 10 to 11 month construction, and we're expecting this facility to be open in May of 2021. The Eisenhower site, again, is a couple of months behind this project and broke ground shortly after. The anticipated opening of that project is in June of 2021. Our schedules are built based on experience in the industry as well as heavy input on our trade partners. These are the subcontractors that are out on the site focused on one specific trade that do this very work every day and have a very good pulse for the type of project that this is and just how long they expect it to take to complete their activities. And we marry that up into a very detailed schedule that ultimately accounts for all these trades and the overlaps. Plus it includes time for the owners of the facility, the city folks, to have time to install their furniture and their fixtures and their computer and low voltage cabling and all the different components that still have to be done to make the building functional after the construction is substantially complete. Well, thank you all for visiting today. I'm Barry Schmidt with McCown Gordon Construction. On behalf of the entire McCown Gordon team, thank you all for participating and welcome to the Anthony Middle School and Community Recreation site. It's a pleasure to have you visit. Thank you.
Today's video production was commissioned by AIA Kansas. The American Institute of Architects in Kansas is the state chapter of the American Institute of Architects. AIA Kansas provides services and programs to meet the needs and interests of Kansas architects and develop public awareness of the value of architects and architecture. Our 700+ members are leaders in building healthy, sustainable communities that will serve our citizens into the future. Visit aiaks.org to learn more about membership benefits and our current advocacy efforts.